Good afternoon. The subcommittee will come to order. I want to thank everyone for being here today to discuss veterans' homelessness, which is a very high priority for myself and for the ranking member. We're going to evaluate some topics of homelessness among our nation's veterans. As always, I appreciate the nonpartisan approach the subcommittee takes when working on this issue. Since 2010, homelessness among veterans has decreased by 52%, and that should be noted. Much of this reduction in homelessness is the result of the hard work of this committee, community providers, local officials, and the VA. However, I'm concerned about the continued government spending on homeless veterans programs and the fact that in 2023 point-in-time count, despite the increased funding, the number of veterans experiencing homelessness actually increased. So why is it that we're spending over $3.1 billion at the VA to address homelessness among our veterans this year, which shakes out to be about $90,000 per veteran, but the number of veterans is increasing? And I want to bring a very salient point here. The average E7 after serving 20 years in the military retires with an honorable discharge will receive a pension of $34,810 a year. So we're spending nearly 3 times as much for a single homeless veteran as an E7 honorably discharged after 20 years is receiving. So we are doing something wrong. We just are. And nobody, Democrat or Republican, on the subcommittee wants to see a single homeless veteran. I want to be very clear with that. But we have to be able to shape these policies so that we can be more effective, and I think that that's going to take place when we look at more upstream solutions. I hope to receive answers on the increase and what can be done to address this worrisome trend immediately, and I also hope to hear from stakeholders in the VA about how we can be more flexible with the funding we have now, not just the funding in the future. We've heard from numerous providers about the need for more flexibility in how the funds in Congress appropriated can be spent. We have also heard the need for a better and more coordinated data collection by the VA so Congress and providers have a better picture of the state of veterans' homelessness nationwide and in their own communities. And I'm honest to goodness, I'm sick and tired of hearing that it takes Congress years to act. I'm just done. A veteran on the streets needs to sleep peacefully every night, and they have to eat every day, and they shouldn't have to wait for us to get our act together collectively. The subcommittee needs a better picture from the VA about the actual issues veterans and providers are dealing with so that we can be proactive. Whether it's a lack of mental health treatment, ineligibility for economic opportunity programs, or whether it may be, or whatever it may be, we've got to focus on the root cause of homelessness. Doing this will keep veterans off the streets, save the taxpayer money, and most importantly, save lives. The suicide rate among veterans with indications of homelessness is 186.5% higher than the suicide rate for veterans without a homelessness risk. So this is a very serious issue. It is literally life and death. Something clearly is not being done right at the VA, and this is too important of an issue for us to ignore. Additionally, if Congress had more up-to-date information and providers could be more flexible with the resources they already had, we wouldn't have to develop more legislation to try to fix the problem. VA does, in my opinion, have the tools that they need. There are a number of providers across the country that have developed creative ways to lift veterans out of homelessness. Some communities have developed one-stop shops to try to address the underlying needs of the veterans who seek help. Others have developed by-name lists to allow the providers within the community to coordinate the services provided to the veterans and ensure no one is falling through the cracks. Some communities in my state address homelessness through faith-based organizations that are not taxpayer-funded. I'm very pleased to welcome my constituent, Randy Withrow from Lutheran Social Services of Wisconsin, as a witness today. Did you bring cheese? Okay, because we're running short here. Lutheran Social Services provides housing and services to veterans in 3 locations in Wisconsin, including Chippewa Falls, which is in my district. I look forward to you all hearing Randy's testimony and the story of hope and the good Lutheran Social Services and the good that Lutheran Social Services has been doing for our community. Other communities such as Miami have developed a creative way to raise funds to supplement the taxpayers' dollars they receive. These alternative methods of funding provide additional flexibility to our providers. I look forward to hearing from the VA and the second panel about what steps Congress should take to make sure the data on homeless veterans is more up to date, communities are collaborating to address underlying causes of homelessness among veterans, and how VA can more effectively use funding rather than continuing to balloon their budget. And with that, I now yield to my friend Ranking Member Levin for his opening myself for 5 minutes. Mr. O'Toole, you have a budget of $3.2 billion. How many employees do you have?
There are 6,800 employees that work within the Homeless Program Office, providing services
Roger that.
into the
I got
community.
it. I was just asking for a number. What's the average pay grade?
I do not know that off the top of my head, sir. We'll have to do a due out.
Have you increased your numbers of employees since 2022?
Yes, we have, sir.
By what factor?
I do not know by what factor. We strive for a 90% employment rate, and we are currently in the high 80s in terms of filling our vacancies.
Let's say you had 100 employees in 2022. Now you have like 110 or so. Okay, so we're spending $3.2 billion, $90,000 per homeless veteran. You've increased your manning, your administrative staff from 2022, and since then the veterans homeless rate has increased. So that dog does not hunt. It's just not okay. We're spending money on administrative people, bureaucrats, and not on veterans. And we're not getting a return on investment. The return on the investment is not a monetary thing. It's a homeless veteran not killing themselves or becoming a drug and alcohol addict and committing a crime and then starting this downward spiral of permanent incarceration, which we need to end. When you approach this problem set, and that's exactly what this is, do you have a plan for a continuum for individual veterans, meaning veteran enters program, veteran exits program?
Yes, sir. Well, may I first clarify, the 6,800 employees are direct service care providers. These are not administrative positions. Secondly, yes, sir, one of the efforts...
Well, so hold on a sec. So you've increased care providers, and you still, homeless veterans are increasing, so what's the difference?
Well, I'd like to, if I can, clarify or at least amend one of the observations there. Yes, the point-in-time count did increase, and we fully accept that and are working for it. It is not acceptable. The increase among veteran homelessness was actually much less than the increase in the general population. There are a lot of factors that go into that increase, and I fully acknowledge that, and that's another discussion, and happy to spend the time going into those factors.
So do you have a plan for each individual veteran, a continuum of care, veteran enters program, veteran exits program?
Yes, we do, sir. This is
and
part
what
of
does exit mean to you?
Exit for us can reflect one of two things. Permanent supportive housing, or those supports are continuing to be needed, but
they're still involved in a program because
they are still involved in the program because they may have ongoing care needs, mental health, substance use, disability management, and so forth.
So Mr. O'Toole, where I come from, that's not an exit, sir.
Okay.
That's just a different involvement in a program. It just is. If they're still involved in a program and they're not living autonomously in dignity, then they're still involved in a program. They have not exited the program. Steve got a job at the VA. That's awesome. That's a government job. So what percentage of the veterans that we're helping, that you're helping with your 6,800 employees, go on to work in the civilian sector where they're actually not part of the government, because we can wind up hiring the entire population? That's called communism. And I'm not implying that you're a communist or that Steve's a communist. I'm saying that when universal governmental employment is taking place, that's a different system of governance than we live under. So what percentage of your veterans that are participating in this program are getting jobs in the private sector?
That will have to be a due out for us to give you those specific numbers, but we do have about 10% of our population every year leaving the HUD-VASH program because their personal economics and their income prices them out.
That's awesome. And that's a good thing. Mr. Olivet, 84 communities have gotten to functional zero. That is an incredible accomplishment. What percentage of those communities, or excuse me, what is the difference between those 84 communities and other communities that are not at functional zero?
I think what we see as common across those communities is very, very close collaboration, where there are strong local nonprofits working with strong VA leadership at the local level and making very efficient use of the resources, both VA and private resources. We also see a real commitment to housing. getting people into housing as quickly as possible so they're not
Mr. Olivet, my time has expired. I just asked the ranking member, he's cool with it. I'm going to yield myself an additional 2 minutes. Please continue with your answer.
Thank you. The commitment to housing is fundamental. So when we see communities emphasize housing, I was in Dallas last month and met with a number of leaders, met with a number of people who are in these programs.
Mr. Olivet, you're saying that the 84 communities that have reached functional zero have a higher level of coordination in between these different agencies than other communities?
I certainly think that's one of the ingredients, yes.
Okay. What percentage of these organizations that are communicating with each other better than the rest of the nation are faith-based?
It would be hard to quantify that number, but what we do see is that the faith-based community has a very strong role to play in this work.
So do you actually have a list of these different entities within the 84 communities that are coordinating better to each other that have reached functional zero?
A list of the local agencies working on it? I'm not sure that we have a comprehensive list for every community.
Okay. If you find a winning team, you look at the composition of the winning team, sir. So what I want from you is a list of the different groups in these 84 individual communities that have reached functional zero so that we could take that as a basic model and apply it to the other communities that have not reached functional zero. Because it just seems like we're shooting in the dark here. And when Mr. Levin says he wants data, that's real data. So we want to get to functional zero. 84 communities have. The other thousands of communities haven't, including Camp Pendleton, San Diego. Mr. Levin, he's got a beautiful district. He represents Camp Pendleton, home of the Marine Corps. I mean, they're bad. I mean, good dudes, right? They are. I love them. No one will besmirch the glorious Corps in my presence. So let's see if we can get the models from these 84 communities to his district. So I want that from you, sir, and let's look at this collectively. Now, with that, my time is expiring. I thank you very much. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes. Ms. Haggerty, what's your budget?
$24 million.
How much of that is government money?
None.
Zero. Okay, so that would make 100% private. Mr. Carville, what's your budget?
25 million.
25? How much of that is government?
Roughly 70% from the federal government.
70%. Okay, Mr. Withrow?
We roughly get from the WDVA right at about $8 million.
So your total budget is $8 million?
Right.
And it's 100% government?
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Wood, what's your budget?
To be honest with you, sir, I am not sure.
Okay.
I know that a vast majority of it is government money.
Okay. So, Ms. Haggerty, would you consider your organization to be effective?
Very, sir.
Okay. Mr. Carville?
Extremely.
Mr. Withrow?
Mostly.
Excuse me, Doctor. I apologize. Dr. Withrow.
Mostly.
Very well. Mr. Wood?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I think just by this little mini cross-section here, from 0 to 100% government funding, we can say that the effectiveness and the efficacy of these programs are not based on government funding, right? I mean, because they're not. If you're effective and you're effective, and we have every little, we go from nothing to everything spectrum here. So I think that we need to look oftentimes externally to the government. I don't think that the government is the solution to these problems. I believe that we can be very effective in helping move the ball down the field, and again, that is functional zero. But I also think that we need to utilize some of these other groups and allow them to serve their people, their constituents. And that's why, talking about what Mr. Crane was saying, if we are not engaging these groups across the board, and we do have on our previous panel a gentleman that's responsible for interagency coordination, if we're not honestly and openly looking at all of the available options, then we're not doing service to the veterans. And when the Veterans Administration serves the Veterans Administration and not the veterans, they are out of sync with this committee, and they're out of sync with the vast majority of the members of Congress on both sides. I don't know a single, Mike, do you know a single member of Congress if you go from the far left to the far right, that doesn't want our veterans to succeed?
Sure as hell hope not.
Okay. So if we're all thinking this collectively in a nonpartisan way, And you guys are thinking about this in a nonpartisan way, but we have a government agency that appears to not be approaching this problem set for whatever reason in a nonpartisan way. That's a problem. And if they're failing to look at all of the available options, they're not doing their jobs for the veterans. And if the Veterans Administration is not doing the job for the veterans, that means by default they're doing the job for themselves, and that's unacceptable. It is completely out of line. So I would like to see some more honest reporting. I want to talk to that guy again, by the way, that gave me that 19% of the Staff Sergeant Fox budget's going to faith-based programs. I'd like to see him sitting here again. And I also want to get down with Mr. Crane again and have if we can do a faith-based program panel. Because you look at the level of recidivism, you look at the level, sir, of people going back and falling back into drug and alcohol addiction and spousal abuse and all that stuff, when you actually do the upstream solution that Mr. Crane was referring to, it plummets because you're addressing the soul, not the physical condition. I guess I don't really have any questions other than ones I ask you about your budget, but I really want to thank you guys and gal, for coming today. And on the first panel, I see you back there. I appreciate you showing up. We have more work to do. It's very simple. Until we have every community join the 84 that have reached functional zero, our work will not be done. And I do appreciate the term functional zero. Actually, my ranking member told me that term. And it is true. We are always going to have folks that are going to be on the streets, unfortunately. But when we can get to functional zero, it is an incredible accomplishment. With that, I'd like to recognize Ranking Member Levin for any concluding remarks he may have.